Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here, and today we're going to be doing something just really quickly, a little bit different. I wanted to make this video for a while now, but I didn't necessarily know when to be making it, so we're doing it today. Until we get into Monday and then Tuesday, where we talk about sort of the big meta updates for this upcoming week and how things have been changing at the top of the metagame, I thought it would be pretty interesting to take a look at some custom formats in Pokemon TCG Pocket. So we've talked a little bit about online tournaments. We cover them all the time. It's really the best way for us to understand kind of what the best decks are and kind of showcase and find all new deck lists and new strategies within Pokemon TCG Pocket. It's what we do very often on the channel, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. It's really fun for me, just as fun as playing the game as it is sort of, net decking and analyzing the metagame as things go on. But there are these things called custom formats, and they are very non-exclusive to Pokemon TCG Pocket, but it is really cool to see how they've been included in Pokemon TCG Pocket since the game's release. So this article here on Pokemon Zone talks a little bit about these custom formats. As we can see here, the no EX format, the Singleton format, meaning only one copy of any card in your deck, and then just sort of the standard EX format. But I actually have a couple examples here of some online tournaments that had over 100, sometimes hundreds of players participating in them that are of these special formats. So this one we can see here, this Little Legends League number 12. This actually goes on as a weekly sort of tournament series for Pokemon TCG Pocket, but this week they had the Singleton format, and I think it's really cool. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to take a look at these custom formats and showcase some of the best decks from these custom formats, and I think it's really interesting to see sort of how the metagame can develop in formats that aren't necessarily the standard EX Pokemon format. So let's go ahead here in the this Little Legends League number 12 tournament, which again is all about the Singleton format, which is going to be only one copy of Pokemon in your deck. So these were these top results in the top decks of the format, and we see it's actually very interesting and very different from the normal Pokemon TCG Pocket format, which is really cool. So let's take a look at sort of the first deck to win this tournament. And as you can see, it's very interesting. Like, this list is huge. But this is going to be a Pikachu or an electric type archetype. And as we can see, we can only run one copy of any Pokemon in our deck, any one card in our deck, which opens up the room to basically have to run a lot more different Pokemon than we typically would. And now this is kind of a spin on basically just being the ultimate electric type toolbox deck. We see one copy of Pikachu and Zapdos. Those are really the only electric type EX Pokemon, but because we're only being able to run one copy of any Pokemon, we have room for so many different cool cards in the deck, and each one has its own specific purpose. So I think it actually makes a lot of sense that this Pikachu deck, or this electric type deck rather, was able to win this tournament. As we can see, we're running one of the Pikachu Raichu, Magneton, Electabuzz, Zebstrika, Dedenne, Electrode, and then Pikachu and Zapdos, basically. So it's really funny to see that since we can only run one copy of any card in our deck, we basically are running all of the electric type cards that you would typically see in a meta deck, typically like Zebstrika, Raichu, Electabuzz, and Zapdos and Pikachu. Definitely really cool. And since we can only run one copy of supporter cards as well, we see a very large variety in here. On top of that, so one Research, one Pokeball, one Sabrina, Surge, Giovanni, X-Speed, and Potion. So it's really cool. Like, the card selection in Pokemon TCG Pocket right now is fairly limited, and we do have 20 slots in our deck. So basically, you're kind of just choosing one particular energy type to make your deck probably the most consistent, at least as possible. And then, yeah, we're kind of just running the entire list of all of the viable cards of that type, as we see here with Pikachu and Zapdos, this electric type deck, which I thought was just really cool and interesting. I think this format is extremely fun to play, and like I said, there's a lot of these tournaments they run basically every week. So if you wanted to try your hand at at playing in one of these tournaments, you really should. It's a really fun way to play Pokemon TCG Pocket. As we see here, this is a water type deck, mainly focused around, again, all of the water type cards here. We do have the Gyarados line, and we have Lumineon with Articuno, Lapras, and Vaporeon. No Starmie in the deck, which is fairly interesting, but water actually makes a lot of sense because there are quite a few water type EX Pokemon that are all pretty strong, as well as two basic water type EX Pokemon. We can still run that one copy of Misty's in the deck, but this deck hilariously is running like one copy of every trainer card, even an old Amber, because why not, right? Maybe just something to kind of thin your deck out, which is just really fun. So I thought it would be cool to kind of take a look at some of these lists for these special formats. Again, we don't always need to cover like the top meta decks in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Sometimes we can just cover sort of the fun, sort of off meta decks. Let's take a look at this Psychic type deck as well. Because like I said, you know, the big sort of online tournaments for Pokemon TCG Pocket of the official kind of EX format, the standard format of Pocket rather, happens on, you know, Saturday, Sunday, and then we kind of cover it on Monday, and then we do kind of tier lists on Tuesday. We keep up with the metagame and the best decks, but, you know, I figured it'd be fun to kind of make a short little video here. I didn't really have too much else to make a video on today, so I kind of wanted to just showcase these cool custom formats. And here we see this really, really interesting Psychic type deck. Now, you may be wondering, now there's no actual way to play different formats technically in Pokemon TCG Pocket in the actual game itself, right? How would you queue up against other players if you weren't playing in an online tournament that we're all playing under this kind of custom rule set in this custom format? Well, if we go back to this Pokemon Zone article, we can see that there is actually right here a way to play non-EX format, you know, decks basically against people in this private match, you know, sort of setting, right? So in Pokemon TCG Pocket, there is a way to play private matches, and basically the way you do this is you enter in a specific code, and two players that are entering the same code here in the private matches will get linked up with each other, and then they kind of play. But there, as we see here, there's sort of this community agreed upon private EX room available, and basically you play private matches and you simply enter the code no EX as the password, and you should at least hopefully be queued against other players that are only playing decks with no EX Pokemon. So now, we don't have something like this for Singleton, although we might if we go down. Is there a Singleton code? I don't see it, but you could very well just have sort of another code here that was for Singleton matches. However, I think for this, in the purposes of this video, there's really only the non-EX format, but definitely go try it out. This could be really fun for new players as well. Now, you don't get rewards for playing private matches like you do playing random matches on the ladder, and they're not going to count for your emblem events and things like that, but it could be really just a fun way to play Pokemon Pocket and battle against other people with these cool, you know, non-standard format decks. So there's even a coin flip format, so for decks that only utilize coin flips, which is really, really funny as well. But let's go back to the tournament. We took a look at this Psychic type deck, and let's see, maybe let's take a look at one other deck here from the Singleton format. It looks like this might be a fighting type deck. Yeah, it is. Now, this is something that I thought would be really good. There's a lot of interesting fighting type cards. We see in the format right now, fighting type decks are actually running a ton of different cards. So it kind of makes sense that these fighting type Singleton decks ended up being fairly relevant. We could even squeeze in a Wigglytuff and a Farfetch'd, but yeah, we have the entire fighting type package here with Aerodactyl, Marshadow, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan. We don't see Primeape in the deck, in this deck rather, but that could be fairly interesting. But we are running Marowak too, so and you can run like one copy of Cubone, but you can run one copy of both different types of a Pokemon card, as we see here, of the single price Marowak and the Marowak EX, which is again pretty cool. So I don't know, I figured this would be kind of interesting for us to take a look at today. Again, just a really short video. I didn't want to spend too much time. I just wanted to upload something today, and I figured this was something that I wanted to talk about. I didn't necessarily know how to package it into a video, but you know, some people might find it interesting, some people might not. But either way, let's take a look at one more. Let's take a look at a grass type Singleton deck before we move on to just the basic non-EX format, which I think is probably what some people are going to be a little more interested in. So here is just a completely Singleton, only one copy of any Pokemon, a grass type deck, and this kind of allows us to play, again, very similar to that electric type deck or even the psychic type deck, just one copy of all of the viable or semi-viable grass type cards. We have the Venusaur line, the Exeggutor line, we have Celebi, we have the Jungle Totem line as well, and Pinsir, which we can throw into the deck here, which actually works just pretty well with Jungle Totem. You can attack for only one energy, so it's pretty fun. I just think that this format is really cool. I haven't had a chance to play in any online tournaments myself, but if I were to play in a tournament, I think that these types of things are really healthy for the game, and I would really love to see them actually implement some sort of non-standard format queue in the actual Pokemon TCG Pocket game itself. I think that would be really, really fun. But anyway, so this was the Singleton game. Now this tournament organizer here, the Little Legends League number 12, they do other types of custom format tournaments. It's not always Singleton formats. They do non-EX formats as well. But there is another tournament here, this Torneo TD No EX. I don't know how to pronounce this, but this is basically a deck, or a tournament rather, that's all non-EX Pokemon. And as we can see, the metagame is very, very different. Now, a lot of the meta decks, or at least the decks that are somewhat placed in the metagame already that don't run EX Pokemon, are of course going to do very well. A lot of the Primeape fighting type lists, the aggro decks, we even see Dragonite and Druddigon getting second place in this tournament. And then things like the superior Exeggutor deck that doesn't run Celebi, and Ninetales Rapidash, right? Blaine's, which is a really strong deck. So let's take a look at a couple of these non-EX decks. And for all intents and purposes, these are kind of going to be the strongest decks that don't have any EX Pokemon in them. And it could be, again, very interesting, especially for new players or people that, you know, just maybe wanted to not play an EX deck. Some are actually quite viable in the format. So as we see here, this is going to be just a basic fighting type Primeape deck without Aerodactyl, of course. But we have the Primeape list. We have Marshadow, Hitmonlee, and Farfetch'd, a very good, aggressive, fast-paced deck. In fact, this deck is entirely viable in the you know, the standard format as well, which is definitely really cool. And then we have, of course, Dragonite and Dredagon with one copy of Meowth as well for that payday ability, which is really funny. So these decks are just all really interesting. What we're gonna see oftentimes now, Dragonite is a really good card against a completely no EX format deck. It's Dragonite's extremely strong, especially against decks that aren't EX Pokemon because they have less HP, which means we're able to take more KOs with that Draco Meteor attack. But things like Primeape, like Dragonite, and like Golem, of course. We even saw Golem a while back win, which was at the time a fully non-EX deck. It actually ended up winning a 2,000 players or standard format tournament, so it makes sense that Golem would be strong here. Again, very much the same deck that won that Ursa Days tournament a few weeks ago, but yeah, Golem, Dredagon, Marshadow, there's a lot of good cards in Pokemon TCG Pocket that aren't EX Pokemon, and when the new expansion comes out at the end of January, I think we're going to actually see even a further increase of new cards that aren't EX Pokemon that should still be viable and perhaps even at the top of the metagame, which I think is really healthy for the game and also really fun. And tournaments like this give us basically a great example of these types of decks and what they can possibly look like. So this is going to be this Executor list, which actually has done well in recent online tournaments. Again, there's an upside to playing no EX Pokemon in your deck. If the cards are strong enough, they only count for 1 prize or 1 point for your opponent if these Pokemon get KO'd, right? So basically, in these decks, our opponent is forced to KO 3 Pokemon, whereas, if we're playing EX Pokemon in our deck, it's sometimes, after getting KO'd twice, our opponent wins, right? Because that's how it works. Now, I do think that a lot of the best decks in the format right now are either entirely EX focused, meaning our opponent has to KO 2 EX Pokemon, or they're heavily compromised of single prize Pokemon, but maybe you have an EX Pokemon that you play kind of at the end, similar to those fighting type decks that, play Primeape, Farfetch'd, Hitmonlee, Marshadow. So our opponent is forced to KO 2 of those Pokemon, and then we can go into our Aerodactyl, which is an EX Pokemon with more HP. But either way, decks like this are pretty strong. Executor here with 130 HP is actually pretty comparable to a lot of EX Pokemon as well. And this card does a lot of damage, especially being able to attack for only 2 energies with Jungle Totem. So I really do like this deck. I think it's quite strong. And then we have Delmise as well, which again, it works really well with Jungle Totem. So yeah, the non-EX format is pretty much exactly what you would kind of expect it to be. Just a full of kind of the best cards in Pokemon TCG Pocket that aren't EX Pokemon, as we see this sort of Blaine / Volcarona deck, which is certainly really cool as well. Blaine's is certainly going to be good in a non-EX format, just like it is, honestly, in the standard format. It's just an overall strong deck, but I did find it pretty interesting that the fighting decks rose to the top. Makes sense because a lot of the best fighting type decks in the game, even in the standard format, are mainly comprised of non-EX Pokemon, which is pretty cool as well. But let's take a look at maybe a couple other. If we go down here, there's actually this cool Steel type deck, this Metal type deck with Melmetal and what was this? Bisharp, and even a Hypnoline and Dredagon. So a very creative list. You can get very creative with these sort of non-standard format decks, especially the non-EX decks, and it gives the chance a lot of cards like Melmetal, like Hypno, like Dredagon, a chance to be really viable in situations where maybe they aren't necessarily as good, against other EX Pokemon. Because most decks, again, in the standard format are playing EX Pokemon. They are typically the strongest cards in the game. But again, for new players, this gives us a chance to compete against decks. Ooh, let's take a look at this Electros Jolteon deck. But yeah, gives players a chance who maybe are new to the game or don't have a lot of EX Pokemon a chance to, compete for potentially cash prize rewards, which is certainly very cool. So yeah, a lot of cool examples here. I just wanted to showcase these decks. Like I said, I just thought it was interesting and it would be a good example here. So if we go back to the Pokemon Zone article here, so we can read a little bit about it. So as we see in Pokemon TCG Pocket, both random matchmaking and event matches share a single format for public matches. The standard format, as the meta stabilizes over the weeks following a new set release, players quickly get bored of facing the same top tier decks, and most are left waiting for the next expansion to refresh their experience of the game. Now, this is oftentimes what a lot of sort of casual players face. Now, a lot of people are interested in what the best decks are, and if we take a look at sort of the top of the metagame and from a real competitive standpoint, the decks are changing, right? They really are in very minute ways. They're matchups against other top decks in the format. Taking a look at sort of the meta share, what the decks are played more than others, you certainly can, dive in really deep and go really complex on, the overall top of the metagame and what the best strategies are. That's what we do oftentimes on the channel, but I think for a lot of casual players, playing fun and interesting decks is, kind of the most enjoyable part, or I guess the most refreshing part of Pokemon Pocket, which we are going to be getting cards more regularly, but in situations like this where Mythical Island has been out for a few weeks now, we kind of know what the best decks are, so it makes sense to kind of fill in things with things, with custom formats like this where we can play pretty interesting decks. So thankfully, the community has risen to the challenge, and with private rooms and community-run tournaments, alternate formats have emerged to bring much-needed variety to the gameplay. Below, we'll explore some of those popular non-standard formats. So that's what we did today. I just wanted to kind of cover this these types of formats and opportunities to play the game kind of a different way. I know this might not be like a super clickbaity video. It might not be something that a bunch of people are interested in. I think a lot of people that are subscribed to the channel and watch this channel are kind of here for sort of the top tier, meta analysis videos, kind of wanting to know what the best decks are. And that makes sense. And I really do appreciate a lot of the players and people that tune into the channel for that reason. I think it's certainly something that I'm the most interested in, and we will be doing a lot of it here, especially as this new format and the new cards come out. It's gonna be really interesting to kind of see how the new meta develops and how these new decks kind of all interact with each other. But I think for right now, again, I just wanted to make this video. I thought it was at least somewhat interesting. As we see Blaine's here. If you go down to the Singleton format, this was that deck that won, and it's just really cool. I think that it's an opportunity to play the game a different way. I know a lot of people maybe aren't necessarily competing in these sort of online tournaments, but link will be down in the description below for the Limitless tournament platform. So if you wanted to play some of these custom formats, or if you just wanted to overall kind of see all of the different decks that people are playing, even in the standard meta, it's a great place to go. So link for Limitless will be down in the description below as well. There's even a 1EX format deck, so you could kind of build your deck entirely focused around 1EX Pokemon, and this is actually something that would be pretty appealing to me. You could get really creative with the aspect of only running 1EX Pokemon in your deck. I think that it could be certainly really good, especially against decks. Things like Charizard are just unable to be played because, again, they rely on Moltres, and things like Celebi maybe rely on Executor EX, so the format would be very different, especially if you were only allowed 1EX Pokemon in your deck, right? That would be certainly a very, very cool format. The coin flip format is actually hilarious with only coin flip cards, as well as the multi-energy format, which is something that I think is actually really, really smart and enjoyable, especially as we get more cards. I think that multi-energy decks could be potentially not only really viable, but a really refreshing way to play the game. Even though there is some RNG involved in terms of the energies that you get from your energy zone, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get one energy. We saw that rather in my Dragonite video that I made a couple days ago, where we got like 6 water energies in a row, and unfortunately we weren't able to use Draco Meteor because we didn't draw, or didn't, I guess, get access to any electric energies, even though technically we are running them in the deck. So yeah, it's just interesting. Again, I just wanted to make this quick video today. I didn't really have too many other things to make a video on until, again, tomorrow or Monday, when the the biggest online tournaments of the week wrap up and we see how the metagame is changing and sort of how the interactions are all different. We're going to be doing, of course, our meta analysis as well on Monday, which we always do on Meta Mondays. But yeah, I just thought this was going to be at least somewhat interesting, something for me to make a video on. Now, the other thing here, I'm going to give a little bit of a teaser. The other thing that I want to do on the channel, like I said, I want sort of other types of videos to be able, I want to be able to make other types of videos other than, the best decks and sort of the meta analysis. Of course, that's going to be the core of the channel. I think that's, again, very important stuff, and it's the stuff I'm most interested in. But there's only so many, there's so many days in the week, right? And you can only cover the meta and sort of the top decks so much, and I want to upload videos regularly on the channel. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to do some maybe custom format or kind of, quirky, maybe challenge videos. There's things like that aren't necessarily, competitive focused, but more so creatively focused. So I think we're going to try to, maybe start a new series on the channel, or kind of populate this channel with a little bit more videos other than sort of, the top of the meta and meta analysis, meta reports, tier list videos, things like that. So keep an eye out if you're interested in that type of content. We should be doing more of it on the channel. I want a good balance of Pokemon TCG Pocket videos on the channel. I want our content to be kind of spread out in a particular way that's good for at least all types of players. I want there to be a chance for every player to have something to pull from our channel, even if they're not necessarily interested in the competitive aspect of Pokemon Pocket. So anyway, guys, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wrap it up. That's been this video. I hope you enjoyed. Comment below, what are your thoughts on these custom formats? Have you tried them out for yourself? What would you like to see put into the game? I know that the official Pokemon TCG has like standard and expanded format. I think as time goes on in Pokemon Pocket, we might get sort of rotations, meaning kind of the older cards are kind of rotated out of the standard format, limits the card pool, and then makes things a little bit more balanced. And then they open up to like an expanded format where you're able to use all cards from the history of the game. Pokemon Pocket is so new that the game is being updated all the time. There's a lot of room for kind of special formats. And since it's a purely digital card game, I think it's a lot easier for them to kind of implement, more specific formats into the game, which I think could be really good for new players as well. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wrap up the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Maddie, and yeah, don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. We recently hit 7,000 subscribers, which I really, really appreciate. And now we're on the road to 10,000 subscribers. But when the new expansion comes out here in just a couple weeks at the end of January, we're going to have a ton of really interesting videos on the channel. And I think that the format and the top decks are going to be changing a lot. So I'm really excited for that. So stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for all of the future videos. So anyway, we're going to get out of here. Peace out. I don't know how to end videos. So yeah, we're just going to let it fade out. Later.